The following program presents principles designed to promote good health and is not intended to take the place of personalized professional care. The opinions and ideas expressed are those of the speaker. Viewers are encouraged to draw their own conclusions about the information presented.
Hello and welcome to Health for a Lifetime. I'm your host, Don McIntosh. And you know, one of the realities of life is that we lose things, that we struggle with loss, we suffer loss. And so one of the things we have to learn to do, which I believe the Creator never meant us to have to really deal with, but has equipped us, is to overcome loss. And talking with us today about this important subject is Dr. Neil Nedley. Dr. Nedley, you're a physician that practices there in Ardmore, Oklahoma, and but you go around the world, and probably one of the things that you probably don't relish but have to deal with day in, day out is explaining to people that they've lost this or that function, maybe explaining to the relatives of someone waiting that they've lost a loved one. This is a big part of what you have to do.
It is. And also, of course, we deal a lot with depression as well. And often depression starts out as a result of a loss of a vision or a loss of a body part or the loss of a loved one, loss of a child. And so in order to really get to the root cause of depression, we have to teach people the best way of overcoming loss.
Right. And I mean, is it true what I said, that really it never was meant to be?
That's right. God's original plan was that we would not have loss. There was to be no death or dying. And it wasn't until sin entered the world when that began to happen, and now it happens routinely. But we're told in the last couple of chapters of the Bible that there will come a point in time where there will be no more losses.
No more pain, no more suffering. We look forward to that. But between here and there, we need some, what would you say, coping mechanisms or, you know, biblically based, scientifically sound principles to know how to go on.
You know, how long people live not only has to do with what they're putting into their body and what they're doing with their body, but also has to do with how they cognitively process loss. There was an individual, I was giving a health summit a few years ago in Texas, and one of the people that was attending was turning 100 years of age that day. And the news media came. She had walked on her own power to the place. She had asked some good questions as we were talking about different health principles. She obviously had a wit and a sense of humor about her as well. And at lunchtime, they sang happy birthday to her. And they lit the candles, and she blew out the candles. And right after she did that, the news media was there to have that on the evening news that day. And they put a microphone under her chin and said, "Tell us, ma'am, what's special about being 100? And she quipped right back and said, "No peer pressure." And
No
I
peer
laughed
pressure.
as well. The whole audience laughed. None of us had thought about it in that way. But as I started to talk to her, she had lost virtually everyone that was important to her at your age. You know, unless you're 100 and watching this program, which you're very likely not. She had lost her husband to diseases of old age. She had lost children to diseases of old age. She had lost virtually every friend that she had in her 60s and 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. They were all gone. She had to go through a tremendous amount of loss, but yet she still had a wit about her. She still was a successful woman. And she had learned how to cognitively process loss, is the term that we utilize.
Yeah. And you know, people that live that long, many times are, I mean, they wouldn't be that old if they hadn't learned how to do this. I mean, they have a real optimism. I was visiting the other day with a guy in the nursing home, and I said, "How are you today?" And he says, "Well, I got one foot out of the grave and the other foot, well, it's actually on a banana peel." He says, "I'm that close He goes, but I'm reading the paper. I want to see what's already happened. And, you know, he just had a good way of dealing with that. And then my grandfather, I think I've talked to you about that before. He was 86 years old when he moved in with me, the last 3.5 years of his life. And he redefined life with the people that were around him to make it meaningful and purposeful. He said, I must be alive for you, he would tell me every day. So that he, you know, he had overcome the losses in the past, but he would treat me like he treated his wife. You know, he fixed breakfast for me and all kinds of things.
Well, and those people are very special, and obviously anyone who reaches those ages and still have a positive outlook on life knows something about overcoming loss.
Yeah, you know, there's a psalm, I want to mention this just before we go on. There's a psalm that grandfather used, and if you're an older person, you can look this up. It is, I think it's the 72nd or 73rd psalm. It says, now when I am old and gray-headed, you know, be with me until I declare your strength to this age and to the people to come, the generation to come. And that was his text. He said, look, this is my text. I'm supposed to declare the glory and strength of God to you boys and to generations that are to come. So that was his purpose.
Yeah.
So let's look at this then. Overcoming loss. You have some principles you want to share with us.
Well, one of the principles is to keep the loss in perspective, and let's not necessarily magnify the loss out of proportion. We talk about cognitive behavioral therapy, and cognitive behavioral therapy really is truth therapy. It's
cognitive means cognition or thought.
That's right. Cognition is the thought. And so that means even our thoughts are accurate and true, are not bent out of proportion like we tend to do, particularly when we're undergoing a loss. We will tend to state it in such a way and explain it in such a way that really goes beyond. And of course, when we believe that, it defeats us. An example we have up on the screen, an appropriate way of looking at a significant loss, as well as some inappropriate ways. The appropriate way is to state, as the screen should be saying now,
reality versus distortion. I'm losing what? An important part of my life?
That's right. And I'm losing an important part of my life. That obviously is accurate. If it's something that was important to you, to say I'm losing an important part of my life, it's accurate, it's realistic, it's not distorted.
What about my world has ended?
My world has ended is a distortion. The person who's stating that, their world is still going on.
Yeah, they're still alive. Their
they're
world
still
is not
alive,
ended.
but yet when they state that and believe it, it's going to defeat them. It's going to send them down.
What about I just cannot, and I refuse to live without her?
Yes, I can't live without her. And you know, we had an individual that went through our depression recovery program who had gone through a breakup. Well, they weren't married, but it was someone that he had planned on getting married to, and this woman had broken up with her, and he would utilize those terms. I can't live without her, and that's a defeatism a term. It's not accurate at all. He was living as he was talking to me about it, and it is inaccurate and taking it too far.
So a better way to say that, then, I think we have a graphic that shows this, a better way to say these kind of things.
Yeah, a better way to state it would be
that I will miss the companionship of love and the love that we shared.
Yes, and that would have been a very desirable way for him to express it. He obviously missed the companionship and love that he shared with her, and that's accurate. And to state it that way is tender, it's realistic, it's desirable, and will enhance your humanity and add depth to the meaning of life.
So that, it depends. I mean, as a man thinketh, so is he, is the scriptural text. So the way you think, cognition, informs the way you behave, and if you can change the thoughts, that's the therapy part of cognitive behavioral therapy.
Change the thoughts into what's accurate. Now, it's not fantasy thoughts. You know, some people will say, well, the way to get over loss is just don't think about the loss and try to think of some sort of fantasy thing that will make you happy so that you can get rid of that, that aching feeling on the inside. But that's a setup for problems as well.
Mm-hmm. So really stating what has happened, but saying it in a realistic manner.
Saying it in a realistic manner.
Now, here's your next graphic says, I will never be happy again because she or he has died. It's unfair.
Yes, that triggers thoughts of self-pity and hopelessness. Those thoughts are based on distortions and will defeat whoever says it.
Mm-hmm.
And so we need to have our thoughts, we really need to analyze them at that time. And, you know, when we first go through a loss is when we tend to blow it out of proportion as well. I mean, stage 1 of loss is the stage of shock and disbelief.
Mm-hmm.
And so particularly when it's an unexpected loss, I mean, it's shocking, and you're in a state of denial, so to speak. You're saying this loss isn't actually occurring. You know, it's almost like, you know, it's a movie that's not real.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of interesting, the September 11 people who witnessed that stated it was like they were witnessing a movie that wasn't real. That was the stage of shock and disbelief, the stage of denial. And that stage should last no more than a few minutes. Sometimes it might last up to 24 hours in severe losses. But after that time period, we really need to state that loss in accurate terms in our thoughts as well as in our speech.
Is this one of the reasons people say that if it's possible, it's good to see the person that has died?
Yes, that's right. It makes it accurate. You know, a lot of people state that, well, I just don't want to see them that way, but we need to come to grips with reality, and that helps us visually as well to come to grips with reality.
So stage 1 then is, you know, moving from the denial to saying, yes, this happened.
That's right.
And then what about stage 2 of grief?
Well, stage 2 is the stage of developing awareness. The duration here is much longer. It will last 3 months, maybe very severe losses up to 12 months. During that time, there's a preoccupation with the loss, so you're continually thinking about it and thinking of the consequences of it. It tends to be associated with anxiety, restlessness, and even difficulty sleeping as a result of the loss.
And I mean, this is normal to last that long.
It's normal, and whether that loss is due to a loss of a job, or the loss of a vision, or the death of a loved one, or loss of a limb, or whatever, it can last 3 to 12 months, that stage of developing awareness. And of course, that's the time when we need to be analyzing our thoughts as well.
So you talked a lot about losing a loved one, but you're also talking about losing a vision. What do you mean by that?
Well, for instance, someone might have planned on being a physician. And they were shocked that they couldn't do well on the MCAT, for instance. Mm-hmm. And they had always thought about themselves being a physician, and now they realize that that vision is lost. It's not possible for them. And there can be a period of grief as a result of that.
Mm-hmm.
You might have had the vision that you're, you know, that you would have kids, for instance, and there may be parents who were always planning on that and didn't have children. Loss of a vision.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it might help to stay with the physician when he gets the phone calls all night. That might help you reorient. That's right. Well, you know, and these are not to be minimized. I mean, people, whatever the vision is, it can really just change your world when you realize it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, that's right. And often it is for our best good. You know, particularly if we're Christians, we're given a promise that when we are in Christ, that all things will work together for good. Mm-hmm. And so if that person ended up not becoming a physician because of the MCAT, it's actually better for them not to be a physician.
We're talking with Dr. Neil Nedley. We're talking about overcoming loss, something we really were never to experience, but because we all will experience it, how do we deal with it? When we come back, we'll talk about other stages and how to overcome loss. Join us when we come back.
Are you confused about the endless stream of new and often contradictory health information? With companies trying to sell new drugs and special interest groups paying for studies that spin the facts, where can you find a common-sense approach to health? One way is to ask for your free copy of Dr. Arnott's 24 Realistic Ways to Improve Your Health. Dr. Timothy Arnott and the Lifestyle Center of America produced this helpful booklet of 24 short, practical health tips based on scientific research and the Bible that will help you live longer, happier, and healthier. For example, did you know that women who drink more water lower the risk of a heart attack? Or that 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night can minimize your risk of ever developing diabetes? Find out how to lower your blood pressure and much more. If you're looking for help, not hype, then this booklet's for you. Just log on to 3abn.org and click on free offers or call us during regular business hours. You'll be glad you did.
Welcome back. We're glad you've joined us for Health for a Lifetime. We're in the middle of a discussion with Dr. Neil Nedley about loss. It's something we really never should have had to experience. And whatever you're experiencing today, our heart goes out to you. But how is it that you can deal with that loss? How can you overcome it, put it in perspective? And we've talked about several things. We've talked about different stages. First of all, recognizing that we've had a loss and awareness of it. And that, you said, Dr. Nedley, can last it's supposed to last like 24 hours or less.
Well, that's the stage of shock and disbelief.
Shock and disbelief.
Yeah, less than 24 hours. And then the next stage, the stage of developing awareness, lasts longer, anywhere from 3 to 12 months. And it's important during that stage that the person not go through some sudden life-changing decisions. Often people will make some pretty impulsive decisions as a result of that loss, and then live to regret it because their mind is preoccupied with it. They're wanting to get that pain over with, and they'll, move to a different state. They'll
get remarried.
Right, get remarried very quickly to help deal with the pain, etc. And then a year later they say, how in the world did this happen? Mm-hmm. And then it's very difficult to get back to the place where they were. And so they really need to endure through that 3 to 12 month period as they gradually improve their thinking, as they adapt to the loss and find ways of replacing that loss as much as possible in a healthy manner.
So then let's move then from stage 2 to stage 3.
Well, stage 3 is a very important stage. This starts from 3 to 12 months after the loss. And during this stage, there's an incorporation of new habits. There's also lifestyle changes that occur as a result of the loss. And during this stage, there should be making wise plans for the future. This is where they're well thought out analytical plans.
So in other words, look before you leap, and you're experiencing the loss, but you just are calculating this, maybe involving other people.
That's right, and actually you can incorporate some new healthy lifestyle habits as a result. One of the ways in which our 100-year-old person that I talked about earlier and others do so well, even under loss, is they use the loss to actually grow from the loss. And of course that's difficult to think about, particularly when you're dealing and reeling with that loss the first week or so. Mm-hmm. But you need to start analyzing it. How can I grow from this loss? There was an interesting study done on men. This was a study on men whose immune systems had already been compromised, so they were already ill. And they had experienced the loss of a loved one. And this study group became to see how they handled the loss differently and what happened to their immune system. And it turned out 65% of men actually attempt to cognitively process the loss. Mm-hmm. This means that they're reflecting on the loss, they're reflecting on life's meaning and value. Even though it was a death that they were dealing with, it does lead people to a period of introspection. And it mm-hmm. turns out that's good. You want to be in that 65% that are reflecting on the loss.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But after that, the group was pretty much equally divided 3 ways. Group 1, I think we have there as a graphic. For some, their loved one's death only emphasized the negative aspects of life. Now, how do you think they did?
Not so well. They were looking at everything as a negative.
That's right. They did not do well. Their immune systems were further worsened as a result. Group 2, you would think that this group did better. They just simply accepted the death and moved on. And you would think, well, that's healthier. It turns out Group 2 did no better than Group 1 in the study.
So minimizing it or ignoring it basically doesn't help.
It doesn't help, like many people have previously thought that it does. The only group that significantly improved was Group 3. And Group 3, the demise of their loved one led them to a newfound respect for life and a commitment to significantly improve their personal life. And those people's immune system actually improved as a result of the loss. Their immune system was better after the loss, long term, than it was before that loss occurred.
So that came from their choice, their commitment, their analysis.
That's right. Newfound respect for life and a commitment to improve their personal life.
Did that happen ever in your life?
Actually, it has. I dealt with a loss 4 years ago now. That was the hardest thing that I've gone through. My father and I were very close. He was always a good counselor, and I could call him up on the phone, and he'd never tell me what to do when there were decisions, but he would help clarify the principles and the issues, and of course leave the decision with me. But it was almost like, you know, a phone call to Jesus Christ, you know, the way he helped clarify issues. Of course, my father was very close to God, and was also a very objective analyzer. And he helped me out on a lot of things, including my books, etc. The reason why I haven't put out as many books lately is because of that loss that we haven't been able to necessarily replace at this point in time. But it was a sudden death, shocking death, and it was a death that I couldn't see really at the time how anything good could come of it. I had to remind myself that there were very good people that the Lord allowed to die in the past. You know, even John the Revelator eventually died. Of course, John the Baptist died, and he was the greatest prophet, etc. So just because there's a death doesn't mean, or even a young death doesn't mean the Lord is not with the individual at all. But I had to realize that my growing from the loss occurred because I recognized my need to establish the spiritual connection like my father had.
So you made a commitment to that.
I made a commitment to that. And I knew I couldn't call him up anymore and get that wisdom, and it was so easy before. But now I committed to establishing a much improved relationship with God so that I can hear the same voice that he heard.
Yeah.
And get it directly from the spiritual source.
And that's going to be a blessing not only to you, but hopefully to your boys as well, as they have a relationship with their dad.
Right.
Well, you know, I thought about, as you were talking, I had a similar loss one generation removed. I was attending the Adventist Theological Seminary a few years back now in the early 90s, and late 80s, early 90s. And my grandfather was older then, and he moved in with me because he was getting up in years. And like I said, that psalm had talked about declaring God's strength to this generation and the generation to come. He took that seriously. And he would go with me and do almost everything with me. And he was quite objective as well. I mean, I was on a basketball team, and he would say to me, you know, that's really kind of crazy to run up and down. Let me understand. You're trying to put this ball through this hoop here? Okay. He says, no, I don't understand the real focus of that in the eternal scheme of things, but I'll go with you. And he would pray for us, and he'd say, you know, Lord, protect these foolish young people as they run up and down and put that ball there. And, you know, we called our team the Patriarchs. We named it after him because he was the patriarch. And, you know, as I would go to school there, I'd come home and I'd tell him some ideas, and he'd say, well, get me that volume there off the shelf. Or get me the Bible and read this verse or that. Or get me, you know, that little red book there or there and read that. And it would be exactly what I needed to hear. And I became aware that really the Lord was using him and had sent him to help me out, whereas he was asking me to help him. And I remember as well when he died that I made a strong commitment to I basically said, I want to be like grandfather.
Huh.
I want to be
Yes.
connected with God. I want to have those spiritual resources. And that was a defining part of my life. Defining part.
Yes. You know, it's interesting, in the classic book Ministry of Healing, Ellen White tells a story, and of course many bird people know this story. When you're trying to teach a bird a song, particularly birds that are capable of learning songs, they can learn a snitch of that, a trill of that, but it's not until you darken the cage and teach that song over and over that then that bird will break forth in perfect melody on that song in the dark. And then you can uncover the cage, and that song will be there for the bird's rest of its life. In other words, the Lord may have a song to teach us, and it's through the shadows of affliction that we often learn. Another poet by the name of Jane Eggleston wrote a beautiful poem about how the mountaintops are glorious, but it's in the valleys that we grow.
And that's so true. I mean, people that have experienced loss know that. I mean, you look back in your journals, actually read the Bible. Many times the best things come out of, the worst situations.
Right.
Book of Lamentations is all about sorrow, but, the steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They're new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness. That wonderful text right there in the middle of it.
Yes.
Or Isaiah 63, where the Lord says, in all their afflictions I was afflicted with them. All of those texts.
Yes. And for every disappointment, for a Christian, there's an appointment.
That's right.
And so we need to recognize that instead of just festering on the disappointment. Daniel never festered on it. He had to put up with it. He didn't enjoy it. But he stayed close to God, and eventually he saw the appointment.
That's wonderful. And, I think it's beautiful, too. We've got our last minute here. When you understand what the Bible teaches about death itself, I mean, this is one of the losses we're talking about, that death, according to the Bible, is asleep.
That's right.
And you don't go immediately to heaven or something like that. So, some of these people that end their lives because they think they'll be immediately there in heaven and whatnot.
Well, Susan Smith backed her car into the lake to send her, quotes, 4 children to heaven because of the marital problems that her and her husband were having. And if she truly did that, she should be a hero. But most people don't believe in that firmly enough to do what she did, and it's an erroneous belief that leads to a lot of problems.
So it's important to understand really what happens to people when they die. But, I think the most important thing when we deal with loss is understanding the resurrection power of Christ and claiming that as well.